You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website for free. Use the promo code Miami30, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Today, I have Brandon Odoi joining me from FootballHotbed.com to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football. And you look up and you see the record, and Miami is 4-0. Undefeated, ranked 7th in the country, coming off a dominant win over USF, 50-15, 50 points. I mean, 4 straight games, 40 points. Unbelievable effort and performance by the Miami Hurricanes. Brandon, thanks for joining me today.
Definitely always a pleasure to be with you. You know that.
Awesome. So you saw the game. You've seen the games. You've seen what Miami has done on the field, the culture that's building here. But there still are some concerns that I kind of want to get to with you, just really to discuss, and just the impact of recruiting as well in the state, with Miami in the top 10 and Florida State really kind of nowhere to be found when it comes to the rankings. They're really just trying to hold things together over in Tallahassee and Gainesville. So we'll get to all of that. But just first, what has impressed you the most about the Miami Hurricanes 4-0 start?
I think just the efficiency of the offense, Marcus. I mean, when you think about it, this Hurricane team has never, at least in the time that you and I, because you started covering the game, when we were at Hotbed together and kind of been doing this for about 8 or 9 years or so. But at the end of the day, you could never walk into the stadium or even in a away game, watch it on television, and anticipate that you were going to have the offensive output that you see this Hurricane team, putting up. Even in the year that, the Hurricanes started 10-0, it wasn't the offense that was pacing the team. It was defensive driven. The offense was good, but, you had limitations with Malik Rozier, and he doesn't like to hear that. He doesn't like to hear that he was not really the reason that this team, performed. But he wasn't. And at the end of the day, that team was paced by the turnover chain, the ruckus crowds, and just one of the best defenses that you've seen. Now you're probably looking at either the second best or the best offense since then. And at the end of the day, when you come in and you put both of those things together, you get 50-15. And that's what happens on the road. And so the efficiency of this offense, the playmakers, the fact that, every facet of the game is up for grabs with the running game, the passing game, and even the tight ends getting involved. It's just, a quarterback that's being mentioned as a top draft pick, a top round draft pick, but even potentially a number one. And, a guy that's, talked about for the Heisman odds. And these are just things we've never seen during our tenure covering this team. And that's all new. It's all warranted. And that's the difference, I think, between, these past teams that we've seen and the current one that we have that's playing on Saturdays.
I totally agree with you. When you and I and all the other press members and fans kind of go into a game that Miami is supposed to win and is supposed to make the spread, let's just say they're supposed to score amount of points that the experts say that they're going to score, we're often disappointed in these past couple of years. And we're often saying, like, okay, what's wrong with this team? Or why are these players not being developed? And I think even with all of the hype that was going into this season, you still kind of had some doubt as to, is this Miami Hurricanes team different? And so far, it seems different. It seems like this culture that Mauro Cristobal is building is really resonating throughout the entire building, campus, team, coaching staff. I think this is what Miami Hurricanes fans have always wanted, and we're finally seeing it for the first time, I feel, in about 20 years. Just I mean, this team, yeah, like you mentioned, this team has started off 4-0 before. They were 4-0 last year, but not to the, you know, point margin that we're seeing this season, not to the statistical records that they're breaking this season. So really impressed with this team so far. We can kind of go on and on praising this team right now, but there are some concerns that I saw or I've seen in these past 4 games. And I'll get into that after you kind of provide your take of what really concerns you after this 4-0 start.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the word concern. I think there are some areas for improvement and some things to absolutely watch. I think just starting from the inside out, got to start on defense because that's where most of the issues are. For a half, Miami looked like it, could be played with by this USF team. I think, it wasn't the best game for Lance Guidry. I would say that to his face because, and I knew this, Alex Golish has had Saban's number for years. He's just a darn good football coach. I think very highly of him. I consider him a friend. And he's going to provide all kinds of nightmares. When he had the dudes at Tennessee, he did what he needed to do. He beat Saban, and he almost beat him without the dudes the very next year at USF at home. So I knew he was going to be a problem. I'd said on my own podcast that I didn't like this game. I have no idea why Blake James scheduled this game or whoever scheduled this game. That person should lose their job because there's no way that Miami should be playing a game at USF in the current infrastructure of college football. But at the end of the day, the game had to be played. Alex Golish did what I thought he was going to do. He's going to come out, take advantage of his quarterback, who is a very good young quarterback in his own right. I didn't see any receiver other than Atkins stepping up. And if you've seen this USF team play in person, he's really the guy that, just gets it going for them. But there's no reason that a former walk-on should be giving Miami the kind of problems that he got. 11 catches to the tune of 125 yards, I think it was. And it took Guidry an entire half to catch up with him. Now, once they caught up with him, it was fine, but it shouldn't take that long. And if you do that with a really good team, you might put yourself in a position where you have an uncomfortable game unnecessarily. And so I don't know what it is. I'm not a football guy to know what the X's and O's of it were. But whatever game he called in the second half was way different than the game he called in the first half, and they couldn't catch up to it. And, I'm sympathetic to it. I played a game NCAA 25 last night, and a guy was doing the same thing over and over. I couldn't figure out how to stop it. I finally figured out how to stop it and start coming back on him, but it was too late. So, not to trivialize it, but it does happen. So, and that's the concern. So I think they found a way to block up front. I think they were taking advantage of spacing, because the receivers are way close to the sidelines. That challenged and kind of revealed something about the linebacker core and their ability to cover the pass. And then we always knew that this defensive backfield was going to be, if there was a weak spot, that would be it. And it's challenged by injuries. I think what needs to happen is the development of some more depth back there. I think we missed Devontae Brown for the first time because, for whatever reason, Richard, was kind of struggling for much of the day. Porter, love him, used to play for me on my 15U 7-on-7 team. Probably had one of his worst games as a Hurricane. You never see him. I just don't know if he was put in the right position. So I'm hesitant to criticize because of my lack of football knowledge. I just know that, a guy running that open is not supposed to happen. And so if you talk about things that concern me, things that need to be cleaned up, it's that, because what's going to happen is you're going to have a team with more Jimmys and Joes. They're going to look at that as a model of how to slow this Hurricane defense down, and you're going to see elements of that repeated. So I'm pretty sure these coaches know that, and then they're looking themselves in the ear, and it'll be interesting to see what those guys say later on today when you go down to Coral Gables. But if I had a question to ask Lance Guidry, I'm going to say, Lance, you can't ever do that again, right? And that would be pretty much it.
I hear you. I hear you. For me, I thought it was just Miami just had more depth than USF. Going into this game, I kind of figured like USF would kind of compete with Miami. I mean, this is a team that competed with Alabama for 2 straight years. Because so Alabama wasn't like surprised this year that USF would challenge them, and they challenged them again all the way to the last 6 minutes of the game. I think it was
Yeah,
just
the final score of that game has no you had to watch it. Like they were in
yeah.
that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was very similar to that. I think Miami actually did a better job in defeating USF than Alabama did, which is kind of saying a lot about where this program is right now. So
And on
the
the road, don't forget, Alabama played at home.
exactly,
And I
exactly.
thought about that too.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Golish. He actually mentioned it as well, as far as like their Miami's advantage in the trenches, and it kind of wore them down as the game went on. I mean, Miami can go basically 8-9 deep right now on the defensive line, and this is without Ruben Bain, arguably their best pass rusher.
No
So
Ruben Bain. They're not really playing the freshman. Scott's not really getting off the bench. I mean, and I think that's the separating factor for this team. And I think that when things go on, as the season wears on, that's the one thing where people are going to look back and say, yeah, Cam Ward was a big difference maker, but by golly, and you didn't hear this probably because you were at the game, but you know, Lewis, I forget his last name for ESPN. He said it. He said the D line is the true story here with this team, and I agree. When you can march in a Barrow, a Simeon, a Moulton Senior, Bain's not even playing,
yeah,
and then you go second line guys that have been in the program. Like you said, I think it's a 10 deep D line. I honestly do, because there are guys you're not seeing play that can, if they need to, they travel.
sure.
So the deal is you've got to be able to withstand that for 4 quarters. And then, oh, by the way, you got a Heisman potential first round pick on the other side that's super efficient, that's not making mistakes, that's
Right.
finding 7-8 guys receiver wise, Jacoby George, Elijah Arroyo, Isaiah Horton, Xavier Restrepo, Sammy Brown, Jacoby, it's crazy. And
Yeah.
so that's a hard pill to swallow for 4 quarters. And that's what you end up seeing, because it's like, okay, yeah, you played them tough for a quarter and a half, 2 quarters, but you got 2 more quarters left.
Right.
And you can't hold up. And God forbid, Golish get the Jimmies and Joes, because he definitely has it figured out on offense. Defense probably let him down a little bit, but that's the thing that's difficult to do. When you're at a school like USF, those D-line guys want NIL money. They want to get $300,000-$400,000, and you cannot provide that. And that's what Miami has done. And that's the difference. It's hard to judge Todd Orlando and that, that group, and I know all these guys personally. So it just, I'm very careful on what I say, but they had it figured out to a degree, but it's only so long. Like Jay-Z said, fake thugs can pretend. Like you can't do it beyond a threshold,
Yeah.
and so it just, and that's gonna happen. It happened at Florida, FAMU. They were just like, we'll try it again when we get into the MEAC or the SWAC. Ball State was like, nah, we can't. We just can't,
Right.
But I mean, then they go out and play a great game against Central Michigan. So I mean, these are good teams. People don't really get how good Miami truly is. Like when you are marching 4 and 5 guys in rotation out there, the one thing that I think you're going to see, and I know I'm getting kind of all over the place, but I'll say this and shut up. The one thing I think you're going to see that USF showed is by running the up tempo, you can keep Miami from subbing in that D line. And I think if you're going to see elements of that repeat itself. And so I think the Hurricanes need to be prepared for that. They're smart coaches. They'll figure that out. But you're going to see elements of that again, because that was the only thing that I saw that slowed Miami down. Just, hey, man, we just don't have the time, to get anybody in here.
Yeah, they did get flagged for too many men on the field in one instance, and penalties overall was kind of an issue as well in this game. That needs to be cleaned up going into ACC play. as far as ACC statistics, I kind of want to run some off. Miami first in scoring offense, first in scoring defense in the conference, first in total yards in the conference as far as offense, first in total defense and yards in the conference. So they're pretty much tops in the conference, but they have yet to play a conference game. So we still have some hesitation of really, I think, we of crowning this team because we haven't really seen them in ACC play just yet. And I want to remind the audience again that Miami was 4-0 last season until they played their first ACC game against a Georgia Tech team, a game that we all want to forget. So,
Right.
We'll see
It's
how
funny you
everything
mentioned
pans out
Georgia
this
Tech,
week.
and let me start with Georgia Tech just briefly. Did you notice how Miami did not take a knee at the end of this USF? Like they just
Yeah.
don't do it. They don't
They
believe in it as a philosophy.
They didn't do it
So,
in the Florida game as well.
right. And so what people have to understand is that happened. It shouldn't have happened. They should have made an exception because literally the game was on the line. But everything they said about this is what we do, we don't take knees, it's true. They don't. And it's a practice. They probably will this year if it gets that thick. But there's just never been a case where they take a knee, especially when the game's out of hand. But you're right. Last year, 4-0 start, Texas A&M, you're thinking, oh, this team could be special. But I think we all knew the defense wasn't what, it needed to be, particularly that front. And then you just weren't getting the kind of play offensively from, the quarterback at the time, Tyler Van Dyke, that you're seeing now. I think you'll clear Virginia Tech pretty easily. I think you'll have no problems with on the road at NC State, which looked really difficult going in because they've had some quarterback struggles. CJ Bailey's going to be a big-time player for them down the line, but they just don't have the Jimmys and Joes on defense. I think the games to watch, although now a little less concerning, are this season is going to come down to at Louisville. That's going to be the game. Louisville is going to be the game. Florida State doesn't appear to have enough. Georgia Tech on the road, Miami, that's going to feel like a USF game. There are a lot of Kings alums and fans in Atlanta. Plus, they have added motivation. Not concerned about that game. Not concerned about this Friday night game. Hard Rock is going to be on fire Friday night game. Plenty of time for people to get there. The game to me, the games are going to be at Cal because that's tricky and trappy, at Syracuse, and at Louisville. Those are going to be the games that Miami has to keep up with. And then the ACC championship game, presumably against Clemson, who looked pretty good. Those are going to be the games that I'm eyeing as far as, seeing if this Canes team is who we think they are. But the development from week to week, Marcus, is something that we have not seen. That's the difference. You do not see this team falling backwards. They're falling forwards. They're getting more people involved. Like the Jordan Lau run of 90 yards when they were just trying to ice the game. That to me is exactly what's different about this team. This dude could be starting for most teams. He's the fourth back, the third back, and he's killing these people, in the fourth quarter where they're just trying to run the clock out. And it's strange to me that he wasn't even really being recruited by Miami at some point. And, credit to Tim Harris, who's now at UCF, who went out and said, hey, we can get this guy. And they went out and got him. You and I both know he's been a stud. He started as a freshman and he played as a freshman at St. Thomas Aquinas. You don't do that. I mean, this is the guy that has real talent and real skill. It just so happens he's behind a guy that's going to be an NFL pick and a guy that did what he did as a freshman, in Mark Fletcher. But there's camaraderie there. There's depth. There's a lot to like. But, like we talked about those concerns, there are a few injuries to key spots, and you saw it. I think the first time I ever was like, man, where's Devontae Brown? Or, you know what I mean? Like that kind of happened on Saturday because you just saw some things and you're just like, this just really isn't supposed to happen. But they'll clean those things up. I'm very confident, and they'll get through Tech, no problem. But, yeah, there's some things to keep an eye on for sure.
For sure. So rushing offense, Miami's third in rushing offense in the conference, second in rushing defense. Of course, they are first in passing offense when it comes to the ACC. and in passing defense, they are third. So definitely impressive stats there. We'll see if they keep that up this week against Virginia Tech. I do want to talk a little bit about recruiting. Obviously, Miami is in a great spot right now with not only just being ranked seventh in the country and dominating to this 4-0 start, but their rivals in the state of the big three, Florida and Florida State, are struggling. And they're struggling not only on the field, but in recruiting as well. So how important is it that Miami continues to kind of capitalize on this really great moment to just really take advantage of recruiting right now with their rivals just trying to keep it together?
Yeah, you got to strike while the iron's hot. You got to go clean up, everything you can. I think with Florida, recruits are going to wait and see if they stick with Napier. And if they don't stick with Napier, who the next guy is going to be. Now, if that individual is not someone in the line of a Lane Kiffin or a name that is seen to be a championship building or winner type coach, then I think some of those Florida guys are up for play. I would put Ben Hanks in that. I would put V3, Rennell Brown Jr. in that. I would put Nashawn Montgomery in that. The latter, the former two. Well. I'm sorry?
Josh Moore.
Moore. Now, Josh Moore and Nashawn Montgomery, to me, are more playable. The other two guys are more legacy Florida guys. I never really felt like they would not go to Florida. Their fathers, they have histories there. There's a lot to kind of build on with a family in those situations. I think it has to be an absolute disaster for V3 and Ben Hanks to flip. I think things have to just go really, really left. Yeah. The deal is, though, I think with Josh Moore, and he kind of hinted at this on some of the comments he made on Twitter, Miami's still recruiting him, we'll see. That leaves the door open. And so Josh Moore, local kid, dad from Overtown, and then Nashawn Montgomery, who, he's really the third guy in this, Florida Gators recruiting class. He's not really a South Florida kid. He's from Rhode Island. He, to me, and he's at Miami Central, which is a super cane-friendly pipeline. Yeah. So, yeah, the story's not over with him, but you're going to want to let this thing play out. Florida State, on the other hand, is kind of a situation where I don't even know if there's a recruit that Miami would want in that class. And I'm not trying to be, flip, but I just, the quarterback's hurt. And I don't even know a lot of their other guys. Byron Luis may be the guy that, kind of sticks out. He just committed to them over the weekend. Kind of feels like one of those silence that you needed to put out to keep some good news. And, Miami used to do some of that. But I don't know, outside of him, and you'd have to tell me you follow that a little bit closer than I do. I mean, who would Miami really want that's in their class? Maybe somebody on the O-line. I don't know. But their class seems to be suffering, quite a bit.
It's definitely a lot more Gators than Seminoles that Miami's interested in. The one player that Miami was interested in, I know in the spring, was Solomon Thomas, offensive lineman. They were interested in him. He visited for the spring game. Has been a Florida State commit for a while. The communication, from what I hear, is kind of tapered off even before Florida State started to, kind of go downhill with their season. So, yeah, you're right. There's not really a lot of Seminoles that Miami is really interested in. But I think, if there are any other players that are interested in the Gators or Seminoles, they're going to look at the Hurricanes first because – especially South Florida kids, they're used to winning, and they want to kind of ride this wave that the Miami Hurricanes are driving right now.
Yeah, I think the play that they're doing on the field is affecting the 26 class, and I think the Coleman kid being, at the head of that. I mean, you want to start looking at your, Javari Flowerses, your CJs, your Calvin Russells. You want to start kind of, captivating that group of young people because that's where a lot of good quality talent in this South Florida area is. So you want to start locking in some of those guys early and, taking advantage of them. You just lost one, Malachi Tony, to the class. He's probably going to come out in 25. At least that's what his announcement was. So he would have been a guy that, that would have, the Hurricane play is being so good solidifies, him sticking around for that long. He's been committed since a freshman. So, at the end of the day, Miami's going to get whatever it wants, down the line, and probably get a few surprises. I think some of the lesser guys in this class are the ones that have to be concerned because they have to, really see if they will still stay a part of this. Now, we are going from 85 to 105 scholarships.
Yep.
So maybe these guys all get taken. But, and no drops. But the question just becomes like, okay, what's that ratio going to be to high school to portal? Everybody's going to be at Miami's doorstep when it comes to the portal. And, I just think the amount of draft picks you're potentially going to see and all of the things surrounding what the team could become, at the end of the day, to be special, you got to win games that, everything doesn't go right. And that's what remains to be seen. So, because there's going to come a day where Miami's going to sit on the field with the guys that are just as talented as they are. Coaching doesn't come up until, hey, they got as much talent as you do. Okay, now let's see who are the better coaches. So, and, all of those things kind of have to play themselves out. But I think it looks good, which is, I guess, your overall question. It looks good. Things are trending their way. I don't know how they feel about, Mendez, the guy who, committed to Auburn. Heard it was financial, but at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff's going to come back to Coral Gables as this season gets more and more special. Again, it's still super early. A lot can take place. You never know if, someone's going to be healthy all season or whatever the case may be. But right now, Miami looks poised to do something special this season. That's for sure.
Absolutely. It definitely seems like Miami is not going to match up with a team that's as talented as them until maybe the ACC championship game or the playoff, which I kind of anticipate Clemson probably going to be that team to meet them in the playoff. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. Like I said, ACC play starts this week. Kind of want to touch on the game just a bit right before I let you go, Brandon. Miami will start ACC play at home against their rival, one of their rivals, Virginia Tech. And the one concern I did want to mention, and I mentioned this in my instant reaction video, is that the running game hasn't really been consistent. Although, Jordan Lyle broke off a beautiful 91-yard touchdown run. That was at the end of the game. That was like in mop-up duty. Before that, they were pretty much averaging around 2.8 yards per carry. So my question to you is two questions. Is that sustainable? Is really not establishing a run game sustainable because you have a Cam Ward that can just, make things happen in the passing game? Or is that needed for ACC play, and is that needed for this upcoming game against Virginia Tech?
I think to win championships, when things get really tight and people figure you out and they've got lots of times to key in on you, because that's what's going to happen the further you play. So ACC play, and especially in the playoff, because teams are going to have several weeks to get ready. I think running the football is your biggest insurance to winning tough games. Now, I agree with you. The winning game is not stellar, but it's also not something Miami's been like ultra committed to. They kind of run in spots, so they're not afraid to run the ball, but you see a lot more running around the red zone than you do, first and second down. It's just because Shannon Dawson has so many things at his disposal. It's kind of like, I wake up in the morning, do I want steak? Do I want fish? It's like, it's really up to him and kind of Cam Ward and his discretion on how the game kind of plays out. Because you see against Florida, he pulled and ran quite a bit, and then he hasn't really done that since. So I think it's too early to say this run game is a concern, but I am hearing what you're saying, and you don't see the push all the time, I would say, when
Right.
it comes to the offensive line. I'm not saying the line's not bad, but they're not mauling people over. But I just think this line and how it's been constructed is more gifted toward pass blocking. And what a great year for you to have a line like that, because you got a great pass thrower. So if you don't have a line that's just a road grading line that, hey, line it up and let's just, knock you guys off the ball, this would be the year not to have a line like that, because it's complemented by having a really good, QB1. So that's how I see it. Again, I lean on people who have a little bit more football knowledge than me to comment on that. But it is something I've seen. And when I was looking at games, Martinez, he kind of starts to pile up in front of him. He doesn't really have lanes. Allen, for whatever reason, seems to run the best in this offense. They might think about getting him more touches earlier, because for some reason he's always finding lanes. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels that way, but he just seems, maybe because he's so small and you can't find him. The other backs are all 6 foot plus. I know Lyle's a 6-footer, Fletcher's 6'1", Damian is a 6-footer. Maybe just because you cannot see him, he can kind of move around. But if you go back and watch the tape, I mean, he's got some of the longer runs in this offense. And I just wonder if it's because, he can kind of sneak through some holes that other guys can't, because those are all big backs. It's rare to have that many dudes 6 foot plus playing running back, but the first 3 guys off the bench are 6-footers. So, we'll see, but it's something to watch for sure. And I share your, observations on that.
Yeah, so we'll see if that continues. I think Miami could probably still run the table without really committing to the run like we've seen in these first 4 games, because Cam Ward is just that dynamic, and this receiving core is really deep from top to bottom. Brandon Odoi joining me from footballhotbed.com. I really appreciate you joining me as always. Hopefully I see you again sometime so we can talk a little bit more Miami Hurricanes football.
Anytime, my brother.
That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here once again representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel, Live from Canes County. Most importantly, subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.